On the night of August 1st, 2025, a sudden blackout fell over central Ouagadougou. Residents living near the presidential compound heard a series of explosions. Not one, but three, each one just seconds apart. Gunfire followed, erupting in a burst that lasted no more than 10 minutes before everything went still, as if nothing had ever happened. There were no sirens, no reinforcements, no official response. 6 hours later, at precisely 8:12 a.m., a military officer appeared on national television. His expression was cold, his voice devoid of tone. He read a brief statement. President Ibrahim Traoré has fallen while defending the nation against a counter-revolutionary plot within the armed forces. There was no body, no state funeral, no evidence. Not a single family member was permitted to speak publicly. The news spread like wildfire. On social media, any post mentioning his name disappeared within minutes. Foreign journalists were barred from entering the country. Police began patrolling markets and public squares, places where people typically gathered to talk. State newspapers all printed the same headlines: "A new era begins." But everyone knew something far bigger had just happened. No one had seen his body. No one heard his last words. No one truly knew what took place behind the walls of the presidential compound that night. Who was Ibrahim Traoré, and why would his supposed death shake not just Burkina Faso but the entire continent? Traoré was not merely a head of state. To millions of young Africans, he was the living embodiment of a new anti-colonial wave. Born in 1988 in Bobo Dioulasso to a Muslim farming family, Traoré grew up surrounded by drought, poverty, and a political system that failed its people. He once said, "I didn't join the military to seek power. I joined to reclaim the right to live for my generation." He enlisted at 20 and quickly rose through the ranks, known for his discipline, loyalty, and tactical mind. In 2022, as Burkina Faso plunged into chaos under the weight of jihadist insurgencies in the north, Traoré, then a captain, led a bloodless coup that ousted Colonel Damiba and became the world's youngest head of state at age 34. But what set him apart wasn't just his youth. It was his philosophy. He lived in barracks, refused to occupy the presidential residence, cut his own salary by 75%, wore fatigues everywhere, never wore a watch or leather shoes. He didn't want to become another king. He wanted to be a soldier of the people. In just 18 months, he made a series of dramatic moves: expelling French forces, cutting U.S. military aid, shutting down IMF offices, nationalizing 3 major gold mines, banning the export of unprocessed resources, and announcing plans to ditch the CFA franc in favor of a sovereign currency. He signed military pacts with Mali and Niger, forming the Sahel Alliance, a bloc fully independent of ECOWAS and the African Union. He shook hands with Russia, Iran, Turkey, and China. In return, he received drones, arms, and tactical advisors. Yet he still declared himself neutral. "We belong to no one," he once said. "Africa will no longer kneel." But Burkina Faso was burning. The north remained under siege. Terrorist groups controlled vast territories. Nearly 2 million people were displaced. Villages emptied overnight. And while Traoré waged war against jihadists at the front lines, forces inside his own government were quietly circling. He became increasingly isolated. He trusted a new generation of officers, young, fiercely loyal, but in doing so, he severed ties with the old guard. Generals who once held sway over logistics, budgets, and appointments were removed. Yet they hadn't disappeared. Then came the night of August 1st, when everything ended, or at least appeared to. The official story: a betrayal from within the guard. But the rumors told another tale. Some claimed CIA involvement. Others pointed to France and private military contractors. A few questioned whether Russia had turned its back. The attack was too clean, too quiet, too coordinated to resemble an uprising. It looked like an execution. Russia condemned the incident as a shadow coup designed to sabotage African liberation. China remained silent. France denied involvement but quickly applauded a new transitional authority for the sake of regional stability. The U.S. issued a vague statement urging respect for constitutional order, without mentioning Traoré's name once. Within 48 hours, a new military government was installed. At its helm, Colonel Jean-Marc Kabore, previously forced into early retirement by Traoré over corruption charges. The new regime immediately restored ties with ECOWAS, reopened IMF offices, and announced a review of all extreme economic policies. Frozen loans were reactivated. French media returned to Ouagadougou. What followed was a quiet normalization, but the people didn't stay quiet. In Ouagadougou, hundreds of thousands took to the streets. They carried portraits of Traoré, waved the red and black flag of the Sahel Alliance, and shouted, "He is not dead. The revolution is not dead." On social media, old speeches resurfaced. Edits mixed his words with revolutionary songs. One anonymous video showed a man in military gear, face covered, reading from a paper. "If they think they've buried me, it's only because they forgot. I'm a seed." The clip vanished in minutes, but it had already been downloaded, reposted, and immortalized. In the forests of the north, local militias loyal to Traoré refused to recognize the new government. Some declared themselves autonomous zones under the name the Sankara Liberation District. Analysts began to whisper, this wasn't the end of an era. It was the beginning of a second civil war. Africa split in response. Mali and Niger refused to recognize the junta. Russia accused the West of orchestrating the removal. The African Union issued a lukewarm call for dialogue. Meanwhile, in homes across Burkina Faso, the same question lingered. Who killed Ibrahim Traoré? Or had no one ever truly succeeded? Some deaths don't need proof. A mere announcement is enough to shake an entire system. But some deaths raise too many questions. So many that people begin to wonder whether it was really a death, or the opening move of something much bigger. With Ibrahim Traoré, no body was seen, no voice heard, no confirmation allowed. But it was that very silence that sparked the suspicion. Something far greater than Burkina Faso was in motion. 6 hours after the explosions, the military declared that Traoré had fallen while defending the nation against a counter-revolutionary plot. But to this day, no names have been released, no arrests made, no military tribunal convened, no investigation launched. The media said nothing. Foreign reporters were blocked. And like a political magic trick, the entire incident vanished without a trace. But it's often the unconfirmed deaths that get the most scrutiny. And when one looks beyond Burkina Faso's borders, a chilling realization emerges. Traoré wasn't just a thorn in the side of his domestic rivals. He had become a geopolitical threat to powers that had shaped Africa for centuries. The first whispers came from Paris. Not long after Traoré seized power, the French military was forced to withdraw completely from Burkina Faso, ending decades of military presence in the Sahel. This wasn't just a blow to pride. It was a rupture in the soft control framework France had preserved since colonial times. Traoré went further. He announced Burkina Faso would exit the CFA franc, a currency still regulated by the French treasury. He nationalized gold mines operated by French corporations or Canadian firms with French roots. One anonymous source inside France's foreign ministry claimed Traoré had once rejected a high-level economic negotiation with just one sentence: "I don't negotiate with former masters." A man who had once expelled his former colonizer from his own soil, could he have become too much of a threat to ignore? In Washington, the welcome wasn't any warmer. While the U.S. officially took a wait-and-see stance, military and intelligence communities were deeply concerned. Burkina Faso had drifted far outside the American sphere of influence. Traoré signed defense deals with Russia, Iran, and even China. This placed the country directly at the center of a new great game over Africa. By mid-2024, the Pentagon had added Burkina Faso to its Tier 1 watch list in a classified strategic briefing. Then came the odd intelligence signals. CNN, citing anonymous sources inside the Department of Defense, reported grave concerns about unidentified weapons shipments moving into Burkina Faso through Niger. A freelance Liberian journalist uncovered records showing a Lockheed C-130 transport aircraft had landed in Ouagadougou 2 weeks before the explosions, registered under the cover of technical aid cargo. No one could confirm what it carried. When a president openly breaks with France, drifts away from Washington, and embraces Moscow, can he really expect to survive long? Even Russia, once Traoré's most vocal ally, had its own complications. Initially, Moscow supported Traoré's revolution, supplying drones, light arms, and tactical advisors. Wagner's network made contact through Mali, and Traoré welcomed them with calculated optimism. But by late 2024, relations began to cool. According to CIPRI analysts, the rift started when Traoré reached out to Beijing to discuss weapons tech transfer. To Russia, that was a betrayal. A pivot to China meant competition on their own turf. While Russia didn't pull the trigger, it may have quietly withdrawn its shield, leaving the young revolutionary exposed. In geopolitics, there are no eternal allies. Could Traoré have been left alone at the worst possible moment? How would such an operation unfold? Some believe it was a proxy coup, executed locally, orchestrated globally. There were no foreign boots on the ground, no widespread fighting. The speed at which a new regime emerged was suspiciously smooth. The architects never needed to show their faces. All they had to do was flip a switch. And perhaps those old military elites, once demoted, stripped of power and revenue, were the very ones who pulled the trigger, in exchange for promises of restored control and international legitimacy. A Belgian investigative reporter leaked a document believed to be part of IMF internal planning. It detailed a proposed $800 million emergency lending package to be released under the condition that administrative stability returned. The document was dated June 2025, weeks before Traoré was killed. If post-Traoré financial planning existed before his death, was it truly sudden at all? The signs were everywhere. French broadcasters returned. Suspended mining contracts were re-reviewed. Nationalized assets were suddenly under reconsideration. A U.S. military liaison was spotted in Accra, Ghana, attending a regional security meeting. There, he publicly stated, "We welcome recent developments in Burkina Faso." China said nothing, but a pro-Beijing outlet in Hong Kong published a cryptic op-ed titled, "A Revolution Silenced by Cash and Drones." But perhaps the most revealing clue was what didn't happen. No official investigation, no parliamentary commission, no judicial inquiries. No search for suspects. No quest for truth. As if everyone already knew. This was never a crime. It was a decision. And so the question at the end of this chapter is no longer who had the motive to kill Traoré. It is how many quietly agreed that he had to go. And how many of them weren't even Burkinabe.